Pedro, how's it looking on your end?
It's looking good.
Good.
All right, everyone, we are good to go. We are live on YouTube and also live on Zoom. So, welcome to Demystifying Conference Presentations, how to submit and present at IASWG, but also at other conferences. We are very excited to have Shirley Simon with us, who will be presenting about this topic that is very close to her heart. And I know that a lot of us have been mentored by Shirley and encouraged by Shirley to participate in professional conferences and develop professionally. So I believe that she's an amazing person to kick off our inaugural YouTube series for the International Association for Social Work with Groups. So without further ado, I do want to read off Professor Simon's bio so that you can get a little bit of context of her and the work that she has done. So essentially, Shirley is regarded as a leader in group work education for social workers. She was the director of the former group work subspecialization at Loyola University Chicago School of Social Work, where she is committed to providing learning opportunities for students to develop skills and experience in effective group work. She has mentored over 225 students to make poster, paper, or workshop presentations at the International Association of Social Work with Groups annual symposia. These presentations serve as empowering, transformative professional experiences for many students. She has also co-authored numerous publications with students on various aspects of group work practice. She created and currently teaches a course entitled Professional Development, which allows students to connect and support one another while working on self-defined projects on the micro, meso, and macro levels of social work, many of which have a group work focus. She is very proud of the offerings of the group work faculty and the strong commitment of the Loyola University School of Social Work towards strengths-based, client-centered group work practice, and is a teacher, is a professor where she teaches in the BSW and MSW programs at Loyola University of Chicago, where she joined in 1990.
Which makes me old. Um, Thanks, Patrick. Thank you for touting all of that. And thank you for being here. Thanks to those of you. I know what a busy time this is for most people. And so thanks for taking an hour out to kind of learn about and participate in a discussion of what's involved in making a presentation. The things I hope to cover would be, why would you even do that? What are some of the benefits of presenting? And what are some of the expectations if you do that? What are some of the different types of presentations you can make at a conference? What are some of the pluses and minuses involved in making each of those kinds of presentations, a poster presentation, what I call a paper presentation, being part of a workshop, being all the different ramifications of that, and then demystifying some of the how-to. How do you get to present at a conference, and why would you do that? And I hope to answer your questions. I hope that as you participate, you write them either in the chat or just flag your hand. I've asked Patrick to monitor the chat because sometimes I just can't keep track of all of those things in good group work spirit. But I want to hear what you're thinking and what you're saying. And then I want to provide some resources for you to go on and present should you choose to do that. Okay, so I'm assuming that you wouldn't be here if you didn't have any interest at all in presenting, or I'm trying to fix my thing here so I can see all of you better. Thank you. I assume you have some interest in presenting or thinking about presenting. So I want to begin by just asking you why. Why are you thinking about presenting? What calls you to it, or what scares you about it? And so I know we're not as big as we could be, but if you have a thought on that, would you write it in the chat? Like, what do you think is a benefit of presenting at a conference?
So we have in the chat to share and to inform, to provide education and knowledge to others, the opportunity to share knowledge and to gain knowledge too.
Very good. Very other focused, right? You want to share your knowledge and experience with others, which is really social worky and very kind. Many people, and keep right, to grow community. I love that. Yes. And to be an effective communicator and leader. Absolutely. Because as you present, the process of presenting, the anxiety, the intimidation, the hesitancy becomes less, and you understand and are more comfortable. I still remember my first presentations and the anxiety I had. And when a significant person in the field asked me a question, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't know how to respond. After a while, you're not as intimidated by that, simply by experience. But all of you will be able to share your wisdom and your experience and your knowledge base. You will also gain things by presenting. Okay, if nothing else, you gain something of value on your resume. I've had a lot of students in the past actually secure jobs in part because they presented at an international conference. That looks amazing because that says you stepped out of the normal, cohort of students or young professionals to do something extra and to do something special. It says a lot about you and your dedication and determination. If you have any idea of going into or staying in the academic world, it's expected that you present. It's part of what promotions and assessments are based on. Other reasons to present are that you are looked at as a contributor, as a colleague, as someone who has something to share. And you are affirmed by that. The magic that has happened, and the reason I continue to support student presentations in part, is because I've watched that magic. I've seen students walk into a poster session or a paper session and share their anxiety and their nervousness, and this is new, and walk out of those sessions feeling so good and so much more of a professional. We at Loyola like to talk about providing transformative educational experiences, and presenting at a conference, particularly IASWG, can be exactly that. What I'll be talking about today will be presenting specifically at IASWG, but in general at almost any conference. This information is relative and valuable, I think. Okay, so there are many reasons to present, right? From expectations, from opportunities, from something on your resume, because maybe you want to go to Madrid and you've never been to Spain and you want to go there. And I know that sounds, like we shouldn't say that. It's not pure theoretical or practical reasons, but all of us who presented in many places say, oh, I would really like to go to Madrid or Cologne or Canada or wherever it is. And so that's a perfectly acceptable motivation as long as you have something you want to present or that is accepted to be presented. Some of the reasons people don't present are because it's intimidating. I mean, it's, you're getting up in front of other people and sharing what may be relatively new work for you. And you're doing so often in front of colleagues and peers, who you've read their articles, or they're the big names in your field. It also takes time to write a presentation or to make a poster. No doubt. Okay. The association has tips to make it easier, and strategies and sample abstracts and articles that tell you how to write an abstract and a paper and all of that. So you're not doing it alone. I want you to understand that, but it is a commitment of some time, no question. Financially, there's a cost. It's different to make a presentation in Madrid than it is to make a presentation, locally. So you have to consider that, and you have to consider how do you fund it, and is it worth it? So there are pluses and minuses. For the most part, the pluses way outweigh the minuses, especially if you're going into a community presentation like IASWG, where you will be supported and valued and encouraged. And it is part of the reason why I have always mentored students to present at IASWG, because it is, as I call, user-friendly. They don't want you to fail. Participants are not going to be there to find flaws in your work, but rather to support and encourage your work. And again, I've done this since 2005, and I've never had anyone say they felt chastised or uncomfortable. So there's reasons to do it and to step forward and to take the leap. What I want to talk to you about is the different formats of presentations. And again, IASWG has their own way of classifying presentations. The one most of the students start out doing is a poster presentation. What do I mean by a poster presentation? A poster presentation is, if you think about science fair when you were in grade school, and you made a poster or a model and you stood in front of it, perhaps at your school, maybe at the museum, and you talked to the people that came around and looked at your various poster. In a similar way, you make a poster. Sometimes they're virtual, like a slide, a PowerPoint slide, if you're able to do that for some conferences. And sometimes they're literally a physical poster. And a poster, can be various sizes, and you use different fonts, and you can put pictures on it, and there are things you put on it and don't put on it, and we'll talk about that. But it is less intimidating for most to do a poster, because you're not speaking to a whole group of people and having to entertain them, let's say for half an hour or 45 minutes. It's much more one-on-one or briefer content sharing. And most people who attend posters do not expect the in-depth research and international expertise than you might in an individual paper or workshop presentation. So it is where I start most of my students, but you don't have to follow that. The second option is what we used to call a paper presentation. Many years ago, people would literally write a paper on a topic of their area of expertise or research and read it at their presentation or read segments of it. Well, as you can imagine, that's pretty deadly. And people really didn't love just having someone stand there and read their paper. So that has morphed into sharing information from such a paper, sometimes actually writing it, sometimes not, and inviting feedback from attendees. Many times paper presentations are what we call paired, meaning that you are paired with another presenter, and you will each have 20 to 30 minutes to present on your topic. And often when conferences can pair related topics, they will put you together with someone else talking about something similar. So if you're talking about school social work, you might have another presenter with you talking about their presentation on school social work. There are also at some conferences discussion groups, just roundtable discussions that you can be part of. And then ultimately, when you get famous and your work is really recognized, you can be invited to present. Those are called invitational presentations. Or you can really be at the top of the heap and you can be someone who gives a plenary presentation. That's kind of where the whole conference gets together and comes and listens to you speak. Okay, and that can be intimidating, but you don't have to worry about that at the moment. The question always comes up, so if I have a topic or if I'm thinking I want to go to Madrid and present, what do I do? How do I get started? What's this process like? And I will say, stop me if you have questions. If I'm going too fast or I'm not addressing something, please either raise your hand or put it in the chat. So what is an abstract and what's it got to do with presenting at a conference? So typically every conference will put out what is called a call for proposals, which is really a request for topics that participants in the conference or attendees want to talk about or share with other attendees. So it's called a call for proposals, which I always think is a little bit of a vague kind of term. Really what they're saying is, okay, the window is now open for you to send me some information about a topic you would like to present on. So how do you do that? Usually you write an abstract. It's an abstract of what you want to present. And they have formats for you to submit this abstract. Right now, they're almost always online. And they give you guidelines on how to do that. I have my own sort of perception of what an abstract needs to contain, and I'm going to share that with you. You are free to write the abstract the way you want, but the abstract is the ticket to get to present. So you want people to read your abstract and think, oh, that's a good topic, and oh, that's interesting, and yes, I'm going to say, yes, please present. I'm going to offer you the opportunity. So that's really what it's for. The way it works is you submit this abstract online with some other stuff I'll talk about. It is then peer reviewed. If you are not familiar with that term, that means 2 or more, usually 2 or 3, individuals from the association, from the conference, get your abstract and blind review. Like they don't know that Shirley Simon has written an abstract and, ooh, she's an expert in this. It's nameless. And it goes to 2 or 3 reviewers that have been volunteered usually from the organization and will review your abstract and say yes or no, this is a good topic, or yes, but they need to reinforce or encourage this or add this, or no, it really doesn't fit. And you, as the writer of these abstracts, want people to say yes. That's really all it's about. You have to stick to that topic once it's accepted, but you're able to modify it. So if suddenly your research takes off, feel free to add something or move the focus. So what do you put in an abstract? And how long is it? And how much work is it? And can you write an abstract before all your research is done or before you know exactly what you want to present? So the real academic line is you should have done your research. You should have your points all spelled out carefully before you submit to present. Okay. In reality, often that's not the case. Often you're working on a research project. Often you are running a group. Often you are in the middle of something and you think it's worth presenting. and you're not sure of everything yet. For most conferences, that's okay. For IASWG, you have a lot of leeway to write what you think is helpful and what you want to say. So what's in an abstract? And then I'm going to also share with you the different conferences and a little bit about different conference expectations. So over the years, I've kind of developed a three-pronged perception of what should be in an abstract. And it's worked really well for me and over the years for my students. You have no need to follow this. You can create your own sort of way of doing it, but it helps me to conceptualize it this way. In an abstract, in the first paragraph or portion of my abstract, I set the scene. I identify the issue, I describe the problem, I describe the circumstances which led me or my colleagues to work on a topic. So let's pretend that you want to write up a model or a group perspective on working with eating disordered adolescents. Adolescents who have eating disorders or issues around food. Your first paragraph or two in this abstract could talk about that eating disorders are on the rise, particularly with adolescent girls. And you could give a statistic. You could talk about the prevalence of perceptions of the way young women should look in our society. You could talk about the harm that those images can do, or the discomfort with not filling those images. Basically, you talk about why are you even thinking about this topic, what's going on in the world, what is the difficulty, or what's the situation you want to find out more about if it's more research oriented. That's section 1. Middle section would be what are you doing about it? What are you involved in? So now you know that this is an issue or a concern. Okay, so what do you want to talk about? So maybe you are conducting 2 groups with adolescent girls in the schools around eating disorders. And you tell people in this middle section, what are you doing? What's the purpose of what you're doing? You describe the structure, let's say, of the groups. You describe the kind of community you worked in. You talk about the interventions you've used. And similarly with research. And somebody's asking, is this section highlighting an intervention? Very much so. Yes. Because you're telling your readers, okay, this is a universal problem or a local problem, and here's what I did or proposed to do or worked on. And then you describe that. And then in your final section, in my mind, you say, you answer the question really, so what? Which is not a very academic way of saying it, but okay, you ran this group or you conducted this research. What are the takeaways? Why should I go to your session? Why should I go to your poster? What am I going to learn? And this section is very broad. You know, if you've done a research study, then you share the findings and the implications of that. If you've run some groups and it's more of a poster, less advanced presentation, you'll say, as a result of these groups, I learned that these are some of the helpful things to participants. These are some of the things I would try to avoid. You can always say more research is needed, more such groups are needed. Here are some of the pitfalls in running groups for this problem. And you say, here are some of the things you might take away. I always encourage my students to say, think about what would a participant take away or learn from coming to your session? It's not so complicated, right? And each of these sections can be addressed in a paragraph or two. Most conference presentations, a call for proposals, want you to write anywhere from 350 to maybe 1,000 words max. Okay. And often you run out of words. Okay, you know, you get to where you'll take out the A's and the thes and make plural so you don't have to write as many prepositions and connect terms. So it's not a lengthy submission, typically. And there is a limit on the words. And most of the time when you're trying to submit online, you are limited by the number of words that the abstract box will allow you to submit. So, which is why I'm going to tell you now, but what's going to come later, is when you want to submit an abstract, begin to go online, begin to submit your words much earlier than when it is due, because you can come back to it. But if you find out the night before that, oh, I have, 200 too many words, then you're now suddenly scrambling. If you don't have information about objectives, which I will also share, you don't want to scramble in the last minute. So in IASWG, you could tonight go on and say, I want to submit a poster on this title. You put the title in, you get a password as I understand it, and then you go back and start filling in the grid. And you can keep working on it until the due date or deadline for submitting abstracts. Okay, so I just don't do it in the very last minute. I remember for the Council on Social Work Education, I was submitting an abstract and I didn't like the way it was looking, and it was, I thought I had another hour. Well, the problem is that it was Eastern time and I'm on Central time, and I got booted off technology-wise, and then I scrambled to get back on, and fortunately it was still open and I could finish it. I could never go back and re-enter because the time was over, but I could finish it because I had started it. But it caused all kinds of stress I didn't need. And so I'm suggesting that you try to do it ahead of time. Okay, I think I saw something in the chat. Is the final part based on what approach, I assume, identified as a finding, or the presenter? Should I only consider presenting on a topic that I've actively used as an intervention or a personal experience involved in the topic? So I have a bias there. If in general, I think it is wise to present on something you have experience with. If you apply to the higher level conferences, the more elite professional academic organizations, they will for sure want you to be at least somewhat of an expert, somewhat familiar with what you're saying. As a poster presenter, if it's a passion of yours and you really haven't done it yet, there are ways to work around that. But it's always more comfortable to be able to talk about something you know. All right, and so if I ask you a question about it and you're familiar with school social work, it's much easier than if it's just a theoretical understanding. And you're also much more likely to get accepted if you have, concrete knowledge. I'm not saying you can never not do that. Sometimes people do a literature reviews on a topic and then present that, and that can be okay. But overall, I really encourage you to yes, have some experience with what you're going to present on. Was there another question?
No, that's all.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, so I want to talk about abstracts and the other things you sometimes are asked for in preparing to present. Sometimes you're asked for what's called learning objectives, which really answers the question, at the end of your presentation, participants will be able to, at the end of the presentation or the poster, a participant will be able to, or will know, or will something. Because conferences want you to provide something to the attendees. So they usually ask for 3 to 5 learning objectives, which are not complicated to write. They say things like, at the end of the presentation, participants will have a better understanding of group work in a school setting, of how to use this intervention with a group of adolescent girls, will be more comfortable with the use of this methodology, or will have a greater understanding of it. Usually use action words. There's lots of samples of how to write that. But you have to, again, have that ready for when you submit. If you have to start creating that a few hours before it's due, again, it can make you kind of crazy. So usually there are objectives that you write, and basically you write that after you've written your abstract. Okay. And often you take those how-tos or those wills directly from your abstract. So that is not a complicated thing to do. Some conference will ask for a brief bio of you, biographical, a few sentences, not very long, but just so they know who you are, or if they have to introduce you, they have something about you. They'll ask for your affiliation. And most conferences will ask that you be a member of the association or the organization. Now with IASWG, that membership is, that fee is very small. And in fact, for most of us, much cheaper to belong than not to belong, and to go and pay the dues for the conference, et cetera, the registration fee. But those are all things I want you to know that you have to collect before you submit. Okay, how do you know what topic to submit? How do you decide you have something to present? And the answer to that is, you think about, what would you want to hear? I always think, well, would you want to hear about something like this? And does it fit the conference? So for group work, for IASWG, whatever you present on needs to have a group work focus, or at least a significant component of groups. So using groups or group work in your title is a really good idea, right? Because it tells the reader right away, okay, you know that this is going to be group related. If you don't use it in your actual title, I would use it in my first paragraph. People often ask me, do I need to incorporate the theme of the symposium or conference in my title? So one year we were out in, I think it was San Diego, and or Long Beach, and we were all on a boat. And so the theme was, we're all in the same boat. And then it had something else with that. So all of these presentations started like, we're all in the same boat, or we're paddling together. Okay. I probably shouldn't say this, but you don't have to do that. Okay. As long as you have a general sense that it's a group work conference, you have some kind of group proposal. And this year it's, I think, something group work and social justice or something. Ideally, if you have social justice topic or relevance or DEI or any of that, yeah, sure, it might make it more of interest, but it doesn't mean that if you have something that is not necessarily obviously related to that, you won't get accepted. I'm less concerned about that. One of the things I would encourage you to do as you look at different conferences or different associations that sponsor conferences is to do a bit of research about the conference and about the association. There are some conferences and associations that are very, very picky in who they allow to present. They're very high level. They want you to write a full paper before you will be presenting. They're, more high level, but you don't want to submit to that, get rejected, feel bad. Okay. Much more importantly, figure out a conference that sounds like something you would like to be with, and research it both formally by the websites, like go to iaswg.org, or talk to people who are from that conference. You can always write an email, look at the board of directors, write to them and say, I'm thinking about presenting. Is this a decent topic? And you'd be surprised that people write back and they care and they want to mentor and nurture you. So any questions about abstracts right now before I move on to anything else? Okay, so what happens when you submit an abstract? Because now suddenly it's out of your control. You submitted, it said, congratulations, thank you very much. Your submission is confirmed. Then what? So then likely it gets, checked off and all the, did you submit this and this and this and this and all the parts you need? And then it is sent out by the organization to, as I said, a minimum of 2 reviewers. Blind reviewers, they look at it, they say, yes, would be a really good presentation. They write their comments and they send it back to the organization. And then you, and if you get 2 ups or 3 ups, then you get an email. Congratulations, you've been accepted. Here's your presentation topic that you sent in. Please respond back whether you indeed will still be able to present. And here are the qualifications. IASWG is one of the organizations that lets you know very quickly. And that's a real plus. So if you submit March 1st for a paper, I think March 10th for a poster, you'll know within a few weeks of that. That's rare. That's really rare. When I send an abstract to most conferences, by the time they get back to me, I forget what I've submitted. It can be 4 to 6 months before I hear. And I have to say, what did I present? Oh, really? Oh, do I still want to go? I mean, that's norm. So ISWG tends to respect your life and your interest. And so, much sooner. So then you get this abstract back. And then you can begin to really think about presenting in more detail. Off the record, what really happens is people submit and then they don't think about it anymore until they hear whether they've been accepted. And if it's something new or something you're not consistently working on, they don't work on it anymore until I'm accepted. So, okay, I better work on it some more. In terms of ISWG and the symposium, and if you are a newer professional or a student, and you hear, let's say at the end of March or April, you're possibly in finals, you are finishing up your field placements, life is pretty crazy. What I find is many students and many other teachers and faculty don't work on it a whole lot until maybe May. Okay, because you're just overwhelmed. And since the conference is in June, that gives you time where you're not also taking finals. And it's a nice timeline. But then you can work on it in earnest. And I'll talk a little bit about what you do to prepare to present. Okay. One note, if you get rejected from a submission, it's a very painful thing to get. It just feels like you put yourself out there and you haven't been well received. what you need to know often is it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it is the abstract, but sometimes they have too many people and they have too many school-based presentations. Or sometimes you get a nitpicky reviewer who really doesn't like the way you word things or whatever. It may have nothing to do with you, and that's hard to feel in the moment. With ISWG, you're unlikely to experience that. They're more likely to say, we'd like to see you present, but could you X, Y, and Z add to your abstract in some way? If you follow the 1, 2, 3 paragraph type thing I told you, or use some of the resources that I will share in a few minutes, you are highly unlikely to be rejected. I just think you just need to know that. Most people will do a good job and then be accepted. The times I haven't had students or younger professionals accepted is when they eliminated the word group. So had nothing in their abstract talking about group. Well, if it's not a group work presentation, it doesn't necessarily belong in this association. It's someone else, but not necessarily this one. Okay, so now you've gotten accepted, you're all excited. You need to start thinking about, okay, what do I have to do to present? And I have a whole sheet of tips for what do you consider when you're making a poster. Like what font size? How big is the font? How much white space do I have on the poster? What do I include on the poster? Do I include all my resources on a poster? All my references? Do I include all my graphs, my pictures? How big is the poster? All those things, and I don't want to bore everyone with the details, they're all written down. The tips that I have for you is that I find most people put too much on the poster so that there's all kinds of writing that nobody has time to read because it's just too much. When I work with my students, I request that they make a handout to go along with their poster, which can be a virtual handout or an online or a physical handout that you hand out to people who come and look at your poster, because it's impossible to stand in front of a poster and absorb it all if you try to put it all on. I recommend that you do not put references on a poster unless it's very key to what you're presenting, maybe 1 or 2 if you want. Patrick's putting something in the chat. Thank you. I encourage you to use some white space on your poster because it's easier to read. And I encourage you to use a font that is not teeny tiny. All right, because you want to be able to view it from standing back, right? And all of us want to put all the important information down on a poster, and we need to stop ourselves. Mostly you have too much information. So again, I follow those 3 kinds of cues. What's the circumstance? What's the problem? What are the statistics? What did you do? And what are the takeaways? What are the learnings? On the poster as well. And then you can give people more in the handout. You give them the rest of the stuff that didn't fit. You also are giving people your contact information. And I think that's really important because somebody may remember, oh, you did a presentation on X, and now my grant needs someone to talk about this. Let me contact her. I still kept her handout. I also have some people who have business cards, and they have a pile of them next to their poster, or certainly if they're making a paper presentation. I think that's good preparation, and that is also where you put your references. Okay, one other thing with references, if you're submitting to IASWG, you do not need to have a term paper's worth of references. People know that you'll research what you need to. And for the most part, I encourage my students to have 3 to 5 references. So you have some, but you don't need to have volumes of it. You can have more when you present. Okay, I'm also watching the clock. Am I covering what you want me to cover? Is there anything I'm missing that right off the bat? Okay,
Shirley, I think you're good. I think continue on your train of thought, and we do have Kate and one other person who will give some testimony of like participating in a conference presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions as well. So, but feel free to continue on.
thank you, Patrick. Yes, I didn't forget, and I'm very grateful. I have asked Kate Pennypacker, who's in my upper right-hand corner, who is a former student, a former graduate assistant of mine, and a current friend, who has volunteered to be with us tonight to talk about her experience of presenting at a conference. And because I think it's very different if I tell you, oh yeah, it's a good thing, and there are positives in it, as to rather than when somebody who was in your shoes or a newer professional chose to present. So Kate, I'm either going to let you talk now or let me get in just a little bit more. Okay, just a little bit more. So about your presenting. So now you've got accepted, you're ready to present your poster. There are tips, there are all kinds of things that you can gather from other people who have presented a poster. There are sample posters. I will send them to you. I think ISWG has sample posters from students or other professionals who've presented in the past. You can look at all that. My recommendation is to have somebody else eyeball it, because you get lost in the details. So find someone else who can say, that didn't make sense, or I'm not sure, or that looks too small. Share that with them. If you are making what I call a paper presentation, or you are holding court the way I am and talking about a topic, some tips that I think are critical are rehearse your presentation. We all get so trapped up in preparing the content, but things that they say, like, stand in front of a mirror, time your presentation so you don't spend too much on the beginning stuff and not enough on the end stuff. Speak it out loud, speak it to your peers. I often do a lot of preparation or preparing when I'm in my car. Nobody's with me, I'm driving along, and I speak it out loud, and nobody thinks I'm crazy, right? But prep yourself so that you kind of get more comfortable, you know where you get stuck, you know what your issues are. And know what the regulations are. Will you have a full half an hour to present? Will you have 20 minutes and 10 minutes of questions? You need to know that ahead of time. Usually that comes in the instructions, but sometimes we gloss over that. So we can talk a lot, and I have some resources for good articles to read, short articles to read on tips for making an effective presentation. Okay, and don't worry about that now, but before the presentation, you might want to look at that. And then finally, do a debrief. Whether you're presenting a poster or a paper, spend some time reflecting on what it was like to present, what you would do differently, what you did well, what were some of the questions you got, who came to your presentation that you might want to follow up with. If there's someone, you think would be a good resource or a good mentor, feel free to Google them and send them an email and say, thanks for coming to my presentation. I really valued your input, because you are then building connections, right? And part of your reason is to build connections. When I make a presentation virtually or in person, I always stay around afterwards. If I can't stay in the room, I go in the hall, because that kind of networking and connection and answering individual questions is what's often the most meaningful. So plan to do that. I could go on and answer lots more questions, but I really do want to open it up to Kate and whoever else wants to share, and then share some resources with you. So Kate, I would like you to, if you can, to share a little bit about who you are and what work you do, and what it was like for you to present.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking. It's nice to see some familiar faces. It's been a few years and, COVID and everything. So, hi guys. Um, what am I do? So I graduated in 2020 and I worked at Gateway. I have my CADC, and that was my concentration. Mental health was my concentration. I worked a lot with Shirley, and I'm so grateful that I did. I've done a lot of group work since I've graduated. So yeah, so right now I'm in private practice, but getting back into community mental health as well. I wanted to open myself up and let people know that I'll leave my information in the chat so that if you would like to bounce anything off me, have any questions later on, I would be happy to answer. I've got a good 2-week period of a little bit of downtime, so utilize me for sure. Okay. Yeah, so I did my presentation. I did a poster presentation and I based it off of my first field internship where I worked with adolescents I just pulled it up too because it's been like 4 years. But I worked with adolescents. I was the drug and alcohol counselor at Stevenson High School. So everybody wanted to like come and hang with me for sure. But we did a whole program. Uh, Stevenson did a very, very good job, well-funded school, did a whole program for kids through SAP. And I wanted to share that with the group. And so Shirley introduced me to IASWG, which I'm still a member of. And I actually meet biweekly with about 5 or 6 other women through IASWG for, just consultation or whatever. So that's been really great actually. And yeah, I just had meetings with peers like you guys who wanted to present. I was extremely intimidated, of course, because I'd never done anything like this before. But I got through it with all of the resources and my peers' support and past graduate support like Patrick and Emily. And not only did I present at ISWG with a poster, but I was looking at my resume, but I also, let's see, I presented a paper the following year and I did another poster at a Cavazam opioid focused conference. Thank you. That's the word. I'm a little tired tonight, so bear with me. But yeah, so I mean, any questions or anything else, Shirley, that you think that I should touch on? I don't know.
Were you glad you did it?
Oh, so glad. The people that I met, I mean, I got there and I was just like, I was the one who contributed finding community in the work because it's so, it was really exciting to meet like folks who had written your textbooks that I thought that was pretty cool. People who taught in Canada or in other countries elsewhere and their ideas. I had a roommate, it was at NYU, who's now very, very involved in group work. And I keep up with like her writings and I think that's pretty exciting. And yeah, I was thrilled that I did it. The community alone was just, I don't know, just filled me right up.
Thanks, Kate. And thanks for
Yeah.
putting your email in the chat. I think
Yes, absolutely.
Kate's a wonderful resource. So,
Good.
and as you can see, very open and supportive. Patrick, did you have
Yeah, I'll do
someone
my
else
best.
that wanted to speak?
Yes, it's me actually.
Okay.
So so I am joining Kate in the kind of testimony of students who presented and utilized that experience and skill to kind of go on within my field and continue with professional associations. So wanted to give 12 years ago
Wow.
was when I was a student in the MSW program with Professor Shirley Simon, and she really encouraged us to go to the Group Work Association. And my first presentation was a poster. And I had had a lot of experience already doing community organizing with the undocumented immigrant population, and going into um, this new world as a social worker, I kind of realized how great of an impact group work could have for this population. And so I actually presented not on my professional experience, but on my the research that I did, but not my own research. It was literally just a literature review of all the different literature around group involvement for immigrant communities, the mental health needs of immigrant communities and how that aligns with group work, and really put together this poster around like how group work can be so incredibly beneficial for the undocumented community. And was so welcomed and accepted, um and had so many great conversations with people who were at the conference, and it was just such a great experience. And so I continued to go back, do a paper presentation, which is kind of like a 30-minute presentation. And then as I started getting out into the field and I had like different sort of group work skills that I could then go out and share, I then started to do the skill building workshops. And yeah, I've presented at so many different IASWG conferences, all the way back since 2013. So it's been um, a really amazing time, and it definitely increased my confidence to be able to present at other conferences as well. So now I've like, I don't think that I would be as confident with, doing skills-based trainings and presentations and even presenting like my research at conferences if it wasn't for the baseline that I got from presenting at IASWG.
So thank you both for your testimonials, as you say. But I will say that the response from former presenters has been very positive. It's been like that. So it just continues to motivate me to keep working with people like you to have this experience and to, develop your professional skills in this way. I want to share just a couple of resources, as I said I would, and I also want to respect the fact that we're just about out of time, although I will stay on if the link stays open and you want to ask
Yes.
individual questions, I will stay online, but I won't force all of you to do that. So I have, I know there are information on ISWG on the iswg.org site. I'm putting in the chat an article that I wrote, or the name and the citation for the article, for a particular reason. The reason is the article had a dual focus. I presented at group work camp, and I'm putting it in here. Okay, the spacing is off, but this article talks specifically about the nuts and bolts of presenting at a conference, some of which I was able to share today. Oh, Emily's got the link. Of course, Emily just does things much more technologically sophisticated than I do, but thank you. But what I wanted to share about this article is, in the body of the article, I talk about things like how do you write an abstract and what is an abstract, and how do you prepare to present and all of that. But at the end of the article, there are two appendices that I wanted you to know about. One is the kind of a bullet point list of guidelines for preparing a poster. Now, some of it is because it was published a while ago, you don't necessarily now carry this big poster. I had students who took big posters on planes and wrapped them up in tubes and all of that. And some of them were hard backed and we didn't know how to get it on the plane. But anyway, it has nuts and bolts details of how big and what fonts and all of that. And it looks like this, if you want to see it. Sometimes I think visually it's helpful. And then Appendix C has selected readings on delivering an effective presentation. Like, what should you do so that you reach your audience effectively and clearly and succinctly? And some of this, I think I keep finding helpful as I go back to it, but it's a very short list. It looks like that. And again, that's at the end of that article. Um, where I teach and where I've been working these past years, I have a batch of alums like Kate and Patrick who will work with you and help you. And I have sample abstracts and other things that I would be happy to share with you. So feel free to reach out. I hope this has addressed some of your questions. I know that there are just many, many questions. I really encourage you to do it. I think you will find it a very fulfilling process. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Shirley. And we want to open it up. If there are any questions in the chat, we are able to extend our time a bit. So please feel free to type your questions in the chat or even consider unmuting yourself to ask a question. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can also put a question in the chat. This recording will be available on YouTube. So if you do leave a comment, we will try our best to respond to it. Okay, Shirley, it looks like you did such a great job that there
Oh,
aren't any
right.
questions.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, yes, please go
fine.
ahead,
Well,
Monica.
I have a couple
Thank
questions.
you.
I put one on the chat. How can I request a sample abstract is one. And the other question I ask is because I've always been terrified. I love learning, but I've been terrified of research. For whatever reason. It's one of the reasons why I went for my doctorate versus my PhD. But research is something that I enjoy doing. I'm just terrified of it. When it comes to presenting, it's something that I really, really want to do. And I think I feel confident that I'm going to do a good job at it. But I think the research portion is where I get intimidated, because I feel like in order for me to present, I have to have the up-to-date, research that's out there, and obviously I have to know the topic and work, and that's why I asked that question about working in the topic, because I have to have some experience. I can't just go and say, oh, I like this, let me talk about this when I have no experience. So I guess is this, for someone who wants to do a lot of conferences and hopefully, get accepted, is research something that I have to really, really get good at? I don't know if I'm asking the right question. I mean, I know I have to do research and know what I'm doing, but I'm wondering if there's some, because research is, there's something about research that just, I don't like.
There are a lot of people that can relate to that. So don't feel unique. So in what I'm hearing you say, I think ISWG is a really good beginning step
Okay.
because you don't need to have cutting edge research or be a cutting edge researcher, especially if you start with a poster. Everybody knows, okay, this is my first step into it. And there are so many people like Kate and Patrick and me and Emily who will work with you and say, oh, okay, this is good. Maybe add a sentence or two about this. And once you're at this symposium and presenting, you will be amazed at how affirmed you feel because people recognize that this is intimidating to do in the beginning. And I'll defer to either Kate or Patrick if they want to add to that. But I understand why research and needing to feel like a research expert is inhibiting.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to not worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that I kind of was trying to get to in the chat as well, which is that it really depends on the conference. So some conferences that I've been to, like for example, I've presented at the American Gerontological Society of America. They are very much, you are only allowed to present something that has been published in a peer-reviewed journal. It has to be big R research. Whereas like ISWG and other conferences that I've been at, like the American Society on Aging, I'm really in the aging sphere. they are very interested in people who are just sharing their best practices and their experiences, but then also are open to kind of little R research, which is kind of like feedback that you've gotten, evaluations, lessons that you've learned over time from practice. And I think that there's big R research and little R research and evaluation and practice, and all of those can make really great content for presentations.
Right. IASWG welcomes practice research or practice experiences as well. So I encourage you to try it, I guess is what I'm saying.
I do too. I second that. Yeah, it's all about the ISWG experience for me. It became all about encouragement, and you feel so supported. And I like that. I love the big R, little R research. That's a really great way to think about it. But I like both. I was always interested in research, intimidated for sure, but like, I'm more interested in sharing best practices and hearing feedback on my ideas or sitting and listening. I remember listening to one of Patrick's presentations and thinking, oh, that makes so much sense, and finding a book from his presentation and reading it and still referencing it. So these are the things that I was interested in, and it was really, really fulfilling for me. So please just do it.
One more response in Monica, you wrote that how can I request a sample abstract? And I'm not quite sure if we have sample abstracts on the iaswg.org site. I have some, and I would, if you email me, I have permission from former presenters to share their abstracts. Again, these were not perfect abstracts. I want you to understand these were probably students at the time who were also struggling with what to put in there, but it gives you an idea. And so I would share that with you, or a link if you email me. And my email is ssimon. I can put it in the chat, but it's ssimon@LUC for Loyola University Chicago.edu. And I can type that out.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the visual, I'm bilingual. So for me, I thrive off of, I think that's why I'm so scared of research, because the way I process information in my brain is completely different. And I mean, that's just who I am. So definitely seeing something to be able to have an idea helps me. Definitely. So thank you. Thank you all. It was wonderful today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have one other question from Amanda. Go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because my computer's been finicky. Okay, so as a first-time presenter, what would be your suggestion? Would you do a paper, or would you do a poster, or like what would be like your initial first idea of how to like start?
A really good question. I would suggest a poster because it's less intimidating. In that you do most of the preparation up front, and you don't have to stand in front of an audience for half an hour and pontificate about your topic. It is more upfront work in some ways because you have to put it on a poster, like and get it all organized. But once you've done that, then the hard work is done, and then you're more giving a 5-sentence summary of your poster and then answering questions. It's much less intimidating. So I usually start students off with that, and again have samples of the poster, what they look like. And then you can graduate to doing a presentation. I'm not saying you shouldn't consider doing a presentation. If you're particularly comfortable in that milieu, you can, but it does, sort of take a little bit more vulnerability, right? And the other thing that can happen, I want you to know this ahead of time. If you're doing a poster, and I think this is the case again in ISWG, that's the main thing that goes on during that hour and a half or hour, is poster presentations from multiple people. If you're doing a paper or more of a, discussion lecture, you're competing in a sense with other presentations that can go on at the same time. And therefore, you may or may not get a lot of people to come hear you. And if, as happened to me once, I presented on a topic that I thought was really interesting and that there would be a lot of people coming, and I only had a couple people. And I thought, oh, and it didn't feel good, right? Because I worked hard on it. I later came to find out, well, that the main person in our field was presenting parallel with me. Well, of course, I would have gone to his presentation too, right? And so sometimes you don't have as many people to visit you. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I also want to prepare you that if that happens, it may again have nothing to do with your topic or who you are. Okay. Or it may be at 7 in the morning and everybody's exhausted and they're going to skip the first set of presentations. So be prepared for that as well, that don't always say, oh, nobody cared about my topic. I just share that as well. So I think I would do a poster, but again, I'm happy to talk to you about it.
All right, Shell. Well, thank you so incredibly much for your attention, your questions, and your participation this evening. A million thank yous to Shirley Simon, not just for your work this evening, but your mentorship. This is obviously just a testament of the fact that you were able to give off all this amazing information just without even like a slide deck or anything. Just says how used to giving this information you are, having mentored so many students over the years. So just found that particularly great. So
Well, that's very nice of you, Patrick. I'm sure because I didn't have a slide deck, I might have skipped things, but I often find that distracts from the engagement and the connection. And I wanted that more than I wanted to put up a lot of stuff. So thank you.
absolutely. All right, so I will close out our lecture today with just some announcements that the International Association for Social Work with Groups call for proposals is open. If you are watching this now or before this date, that is great. Please go to iaswg.org to view the call for proposals. And if you are watching this afterwards, because this recording isn't going anywhere, then we hope that you'll submit to the next one. So, all right, thank you all so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you for all the technical support as well as the emotional